I found out my best friend was dating my husband and they were planning to tell me later, which is the kind of sentence you assume only lives inside a meme with a glittery font until you hear it with your own ears and feel all your organs rearrange themselves out of politeness. And I'm Maya, 34, a pediatric nurse who spends 12-hour shifts being the calm person in rooms that would swallow other people whole. And I used to think the worst sound I'd ever hear was a monitor flatlining until I heard my best friend's laugh through my husband's phone behind a locked bathroom door. It didn't start with a laugh, though. It started the way betrayal usually starts, with small mercies that weren't. Jacob, my husband, began buying fresh flowers on Thursdays, daffodils that made our little kitchen look like it knew a happy story. He'd never been a flowers guy. I fell into it anyway, told myself that after 8 years maybe we were finally becoming those people who remember the tender things instead of treating them like optional garnish. He started putting his phone face down on the table. He started helping with the laundry and always seemed to get to my scrubs first. He began working late at a job that had always ended by 6. It was all so mundane that it could have been love. I wanted it to be love. It was just choreography. And then there was Elise. My best friend. I can draw the map of how we became friends in a way that makes goosebumps do logistics. We met at 19 in a dorm that smelled like ramen and ambition. Elise was the kind of girl who could wear a thrift men's blazer and make it look like a life choice. She borrowed my stapler and never returned it, and somehow we were borrowing names in roll call and making up inside jokes about professors. We stayed. Through roommates and breakups, and the semester I ate only apples because I forgot other food existed, and she shoved burritos into my hands like she was saving a species. She stood behind me when I chopped 5 inches off my hair and in front of me when I didn't get into my first-choice residency. I stood beside her when she launched a tiny marketing firm out of a coffee shop and pretended the wobble was part of the aesthetic. She was the person I texted 5 minutes late, sorry, tell them I'm stuck in ice, when I meant tell them I'm scared. She liked Jacob from the beginning, which I wore like a blessing. They had banter. He'd tease her about her dramatic sunglasses. She'd roast him for his obsession with artisanal pickles. When we bought our little brick townhouse with stairs that tried to kill me every laundry day, we used it to host people like we were all in a show about competent adults. Elise would arrive early, lipstick perfect, and help me slice fruit, licking juice from her fingers, laughing as she told me the latest client horror story, someone who demanded a viral campaign with rustic vibes. She called Jacob brother, a title she earned by showing up when his father had a health scare and sitting with me in a hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m. while we stared at vending machines and told bad jokes. When the scare turned out to be nothing and he cried out of relief in our car, I texted her all good and 3 heart emojis because we were a triangle that felt like a family. The first real crack came with a calendar confusion. I had an overnight shift that got cancelled at the last minute because our census dropped. I thought of it like a found lottery ticket. I drove home listening to a podcast about spring peepers and how they survive winter by turning into little frog ice pops. Why would I remember that? And I planned to surprise Jacob with tacos because that's what you do when the world gives you 30 extra hours. I pulled into the driveway and saw his car. Good. I balanced a bag of food like a trophy and let myself in quietly, imagining the fun of being the one to say boo for once. There were voices. And then my name. Maya, Elise said, and the word had a smile inside it, except she wasn't talking to me. Her laugh followed, muffled, from the back of the house where the sliding door opens to our postage stamp yard. The laugh was familiar, too familiar. I walked into the kitchen and saw 2 glasses on the counter, one with lipstick, a bottle of the good tequila open like a promise I hadn't been invited to. I told myself story number 1. Maybe she came by to borrow a charger like she always did. Maybe they were just outside, getting fresh air, telling a funny story about me being late, and I could cry into the tacos out of happiness at their comfort with each other. They came in through the sliding door. He was holding her phone. She was holding my sweater. My green sweater. The one that hangs on the chair by the door that I throw on when the house forgets it's a house and starts being a fridge. Surprise, I said, and the word came out shaped like someone else's mouth. Jacob blinked, shock stepping on his face like a cat. He kissed my cheek too slow, said, "Hey babe," and Elise said, "You're home," with a volume that belonged to a theater, not 6 feet of tile. I watched them be breezy together. I watched myself be breezy back. We ate tacos and chatted about nothing. They told me a story about a neighbor I saw every week. I went to put the empty foil in the recycling and my hand shook for the first time in a way I couldn't call cold. When Elise left, she hugged me longer than usual, a hug like she was signing something in secret. Jacob wiped the counter with a vigor that made the granite shine. That night he fell asleep on the couch after just one more episode. I stared at the ceiling and counted a chorus of frogs. Men who cheat all think they invented subtlety. Women who cheat with them think they invented nuance. You know what actually knows what's happening? The body. The brain spends days narrating, explaining, proving it's still the adult in the room. Meanwhile, your gut has flipped a do not disturb sign and is packing a go bag. My go bag, unfortunately, contained my entire life. Insurance cards. Photos of my mother with cake frosting on her nose. My grandmother's tiny gold ring with the ruby that isn't worth much but pays rent for every family story. Elise's voice on our voicemail singing happy half-birthday because that's the kind of friend she was. I didn't know how to leave with all of that. So I didn't. I did the thing women do when they need to prove to themselves that they aren't crazy. I gathered data. I am a nurse. Data is how I help frightened parents breathe. Her oxygen saturation is 98. The fever's trending down. The dose is weight-based. Your child is not going to overdose on love. So I took vitals on my life. I noticed the Thursdays that came with flowers also came with Elise's so swamped texts. I noticed my husband began to smell like a new perfume, faint, expensive, the kind that calls itself a number. I noticed he and Elise created shared jokes I hadn't seen invented. I stood in my little bathroom and rehearsed conversations with different endings. One where I was chill and magnanimous and they confessed like well-trained students. One where I was terrible and loud and they begged me to be my old self. It was a Tuesday during the night shift when the universe decided to be unsubtle. An 8-year-old with asthma was making whales out of the nebula of his breath and I was helping him ride the cloud when my Apple Watch buzzed with Jacob's name. I ignored it. It buzzed again. On the third buzz I looked at the tiny rectangle out of habit, because I am also a person whose sister texts call me when a bus is delayed and whose mother texts I dreamed of teeth. Are you okay? My watch lit up with a message preview just enough to be a universe, can't wait to tell her. Tonight was, and then it cut off. I stared at the kidneys drawn on the posters in the exam room like they had a suggestion. Hey, the 8-year-old said softly. You're crying. I hadn't noticed. I laughed, wiped my face with my sleeve. I'm so sorry, bud, I said. My eyeballs are leaky. Tell me something gross about whales. He did. When his mother thanked me later with a graceless hug that felt like the world still made sense somewhere, I thought tonight was, what? The rest of the message arrived while I was literally holding a baby whose heart had decided to practice acrobatics. The parents were crying, the monitor was singing, the resident was paging, and I looked down at my wrist like there was a note from God. Everything. I love you. Don't chicken out. There it was. Data. I moved through the rest of my shift like a person who had put her brain on a shelf and was borrowing a rental brain that drives the speed limit. At 6:40 a.m. I sat in my car and breathed like I tell other people to breathe. In through the nose for 4, hold for 4, out through the mouth like you're blowing out a birthday candle for 6. I went home. Jacob was at the table, laptop open, telling his coffee it was going to be a big day. He has a big day voice. He used it for presentations and home improvement projects and once, heartbreakingly, when he told me my lemon bars were life-changing. I stood in the doorway and watched a man I loved be the kind of person I didn't. What happened last night? I said. No preamble. No warm-up jog before the long run. He looked up, blinked, a small smile hovering like a guilty angel. Just grabbed a drink with a client. What's up? Knew you were going to say that, I said. Try again. I don't know what you... Elise, I said, and the name was a coin dropping down a well. The quiet after it was the quiet after a crash. He had options. He tried none of them. He folded. Okay, he said, and the word was a grate I wanted to kick out of the floor. We were going to tell you. We were planning to tell me later, I said, holding up my wrist like it had a witness stand built into it. That later. His face did a thing I will spend a decade trying not to memeize. We didn't want to hurt you, he said, and I laughed in the way that has concerned strangers in grocery aisles. You didn't want to hurt me, I repeated, tasting the sentence, so you decided to practice secretly until you got good at hurting me for real. He swore it had only been a few weeks. He swore there was nothing serious at first, just a kinship that surprised them both. I didn't ask for details because certain specifics are only candy for ghosts. I asked for measures, how long? Who knew? What did planning to tell me mean? Were they storyboarding? Were there bullet points? Was there a section for my reaction? He said they wanted to find the right time. He said I'd been stressed. He said he was confused. I said I wanted him to leave. It takes exactly 9 minutes for a man who didn't plan on leaving to throw essentials into a duffel bag. His toothbrush, like an idiot soldier, saluted from the top of the bag. He asked where to go like homelessness was a new app he had to download. I said, anywhere that isn't here, and he nodded like it was generous. He kissed my forehead, God help me he did, and I stepped back so that he missed. The door closed. I collapsed, not dramatically, just in the way of a person whose bones agreed to a temporary strike. I lay on the kitchen tile next to the daffodils and thought, I am not built for this, and then I remembered the child last night holding the Neb mask like a spaceship and I got up out of spite. I called Elise. She answered on the second ring with that bright morning voice she uses for clients who want that viral magic. Hey sunshine, she said, and I almost admired the size of the brass. We were going to. You were planning to tell me later, I said. Wonderful. Consider this later. Silence. Then Maya, she said, as if the name could rewind time. I'm sorry. We didn't mean to. You meant to do exactly what you did, I said, not cruel, just exact. You meant to keep 2 futures in your hands and make me pick the one where I look gracious. Don't make this into a competition, she said, and there it was, the story people like to use when they want to keep the cake in the knife. Don't make this into a brand, I said. You're not a girl's girl if the girl you're a girl to is the man you're dating. She cried. I listened. She said he was so lonely and I said, we share a bed. She said, we're soulmates, and I said, then you'll be fine on a different day than this one. She said, please don't tell anyone yet, and I said, you already did. You learn very quickly how many people love you. My sister showed up with bagels without being asked and texted downstairs, so I wouldn't have to pretend to be okay enough to say, come in. My mother drove over with a pot of lentils and an expression that could peel paint. My friend Jordan came with a notebook labeled Operation Phoenix and wrote headings like lawyer and sleep and music that is not a knife and insisted we put an actual playlist together so that when sadness played the opening bars of songs that belonged to them I could press skip to something that belonged to me. I told work. They told me to take time. I came in for 2 shifts anyway because there is nothing like holding a preemie's foot, that impossible wedge, to remind you time can be stitched. Elise texted me paragraphs that sprinted and tripped. Jacob sent brief apologies. His mother called me to say, in a voice that made me forgive her even while I wanted to throw my phone into a lake, that she loved me regardless and her son was a fool. My father sent one line, I'm proud of how you're breathing, which was either a joke or a lifetime in 7 words. I found a therapist with a couch and a tissue box that was not performative. She said things like, let's name the loss, and we did, and it felt like labeling the wires before you open a machine. Elise and Jacob tried a soft launch. They posted photos of Friendsgiving where their elbows were too familiar with each other. People noticed, people always notice. Some unfollowed out of personal ethics. Some followed harder because spectacle is free. The Venn diagram of our lives tried to be a triad again until I drew a circle of my own and stood in it. I blocked where blocking was self-respect. I muted where muting was peace. I didn't go to the places that belonged to them. I found new routes to the places that belonged to me. I took a ceramics class and made a bowl so ugly it could only be honest. I learned to sleep in the middle of the bed without apologizing to either side. There was the practical break too, the division of objects. Dignity should be able to sit out those conversations. It cannot. We stood in our living room and pointed at a coffee table like it was a witness. He took the couch. I kept the silly lamp shaped like a flamingo that he claimed to hate, which I realized later he had actually secretly loved because it made me laugh when we were too tired to talk. He wanted the framed print of the city map. I said no. He wanted the Dutch oven because he was the one who made stew. I said yes and gave him every wooden spoon so I could buy new ones that had not stirred anything with his hands. We signed papers. He moved out. I cried once when I saw a sock in the dryer that wasn't mine, and then I put it in a box labeled Jacob and never looked in the box again. 3 months went by. People aged in front of me. The daffodils learned their cycle and came back like cowards with stems. I went to work and told a teenager that the brave thing is not always the loud thing. I got a postcard from Elise. She's the kind of person who sends postcards from 40 minutes away because it's more romantic. It said in her writing that I know better than my own, I miss you. I'm happy. Can both be true. I put the card in a drawer and put the drawer in my mind in a room that is locked. Time is a solvent. It made the sharp things duller. Jacob and Elise became facts other people adjusted around. I ran into them once at a street fair. He had grown a beard the way men do when they need to hide a new geography. She wore a dress that made her look like an idea of summer. They stopped. We exchanged words that were polite like napkins. When we walked away, my friend Jordan said, "You didn't die," and I said, "I didn't die," and we high-fived like idiots in public, and it felt like a bell ringing. And then, because the universe has a terrible sense of humor, they planned to tell me something else. Elise called on a Wednesday. I was placing an order for new scrubs because I wanted to wear colors my life hadn't seen me in before. She said, "I don't want you to hear it from anyone else," and I looked at my ceiling and said, "You're pregnant," and she cried and said yes. I sat on my couch and let my body decide whether to be magnanimous or furious. It chose a third thing. It chose to be still. "Congratulations," I said, and meant it in a complicated way that will never be a Facebook reaction. After we hung up, I drove to the river and sat on a bench and watched water be itself without asking permission. There's a woman I always see there, walking a dog who is deeply invested in sticks. We nod at each other like co-conspirators. That day she stopped. She said, "I like your new hair," because I had cut bangs in a fit of I'm not a person who can pull off bangs, and then pulled them off. I said thanks and told her, this stranger with a stick silly dog, the whole story, the condensed version, the Netflix recap voice. She listened. She said, "You're not a tragic figure," and it was the kindest thing anyone had said since my father told me he was proud of my lungs. Here's the part in stories where the narrator often tells you they met someone new and it swept the ashes into an art project. I did meet someone new, but it wasn't a he. It was a me. I started running, even though I thought running was for people who liked suffering as a brand. I discovered that I liked the part where your body starts to believe you when you say just to the lamppost, and then you do it and there is a small parade inside your chest. I started cooking only for myself without pretending to be scholarly about it. Eggs for dinner, toast for wisdom, strawberries for grace. I attended a grief group which marketed itself as for death and the other kinds. We sat in a circle and told it like it is, and nobody tried to sell anyone a shortcut. I took pictures again. They were blurry and I loved them. And then slowly the world put a person in my path who wasn't a band-aid or a lesson or a test. Theo. He's a carpenter who builds bookshelves like he knows that books are more than inventory. We met when he came to install a set of floating shelves in my living room because I had decided the only thing I wanted to acquire for 6 months was places to put stories. He was quiet the way rivers are, not shy, just sure. He asked if I wanted the shelves level with the window or the world. I said, "Are those different?" And he said, "Sometimes," and the conversation somehow beat anything I've heard at a party in a decade. He didn't have the kind of smile that takes selfies. He had the kind that shows up when you say something true. I told him 3 dates in that my heart was a bit of a laundry basket right now, full of socks that don't match and shirts inside out. He said, I can carry things, and he didn't mean fix. He meant carry. We've been doing that for each other since Elise had her baby. She sent me a picture I did not ask for, and I looked at it because some things, despite everything, are bigger than your bruises. The baby looked like a fist holding a secret. Jacob wrote me a month later, I owe you an apology that isn't a thesis. It was 3 sentences. It said he hurt me because he was a coward and because I had made him feel like he was a good man and he didn't know how to live up to that. He said he hopes my life holds me the way I always held everybody in rooms that were too small for honesty. I put it in the drawer with the postcard. I took the drawer out. I burned both on a Saturday at Jordan's apartment in a dish she swore could handle it. We watched the papers curl into little languageless moths. We opened a window and let the smoke out. I kept my job. I got promoted to charge nurse on Tuesdays because apparently the universe trusts me more than I trust myself. I still flinch sometimes when someone's phone lights up with a message preview, as if names are spells. I still think of Elise when I smell that number perfume. I still look at the daffodils in March and want to say, not today. But I also have a cactus that refuses to die and a playlist that is all bass and no memories and a habit of writing down 3 nice things at the end of the day, even if one of them is my socks were ready for my feet when I needed them. Last week, I ran into Elise again because cities are small and you do not get to choose the extras in your movie. She was pushing a stroller and wearing sunglasses that looked like forgiveness is a brand. We stopped. We said the weather. She said, I miss you the way you say, I miss being the person who could say I miss you and have it matter. I said, I wish you well, and I meant it like a prayer I didn't want to stay for. The baby sneezed and we both laughed like thieves caught by something adorable. Then I said, I have to go, and I did. Here's the last true thing they were planning to tell me later. Maybe they would have picked a sunset. Maybe they would have chosen a restaurant where I couldn't yell. Maybe they would have brought tissues and explained themselves with the practiced gentleness people use when they want to be applauded for not setting the house on fire twice. Maybe I would have found a part of me that wanted to make it easy. I don't know. I don't have to know. That's the strangest relief. I'm Maya, 34. I hold small hands while machines beep and I talk grown men out of panic by naming their feelings, and I keep my own heart in my chest now without issuing guest passes. I learned that later is a place cowards build to hide time in. I learned that betrayal chooses ordinary objects, a sweater, a slide door, a common laugh, and turns them into trophies unless you take them back. I learned that you can be the person who says leave, and then also be the patient who needs soup. I learned that none of this makes me less of who I was. It makes me more of the person I tell parents to be when their kid is scared, calm, honest, willing to sit in a chair until it becomes a boat. Tonight, Theo is building me a little step stool because I keep insisting I don't need one to reach the top shelf and then almost dying doing yoga with a mixing bowl. He keeps looking over at me from the floor, pencil behind his ear, and grinning like we're both in on something. We are. The something is this: I didn't break. I bent and then I went on. And when I put the first book on the new shelf, it'll be one I loved before any of this happened and one I'll love after, because I'm a person who has a before and an after and they are both mine.